other people's stories are the reason I am where I am. Other people's experiences, life lessons gave me hope and possibility when I saw it. And I had to do a huge reframe for myself in understanding my story isn't mine.
Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artists, makers, and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. I'd love to invite you to stop by dailycreativehabit.com. I have created all sorts of resources for you because I truly believe that when you create, we all win. So I want to see as many of you stepping into your creativity fully, closing the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And I want to help you do that. So I've created resources like the Daily Creative Habit Journal. I've written a book, Make Fun a Habit. I have all sorts of free resources like this podcast and a Facebook group called Daily Creative Habit. Also the paid membership for Daily Creative Habit, where we get together with like-minded creators, all pushing in the same direction, encouraging each other and saying, we're going to show up every single day to create something to get our work out there into the world. So if you would like to be a part of any of those things, again, stop by dailycreativehabit.com or simply visit my website, which is mikebrennan.me. We're going to talk about something today that many creatives avoid or honestly just feel real gross about, and that is sales. That's right, you heard me right, sales. Well, today's guest, Nicole Cramer, we get into why sales is important, how it can be not so gross, and actually have some humanity in our approach to selling. And let's be honest, as creative people, if you're creating something and you want to make a living off of what you create, whether that's a service or a product or a piece of art, whatever it is, you need the skill set to be able to engage in conversations with people and not try and strong arm them into buying something that they don't really want to buy, or it's not about coercion or convincing, but it's about having these conversations and it's about bringing value. And I know some of that stuff can sound like jargon sometimes, but Nicole Cramer today really helps us unpack what that can look like, why it's important to engage with these conversations, and what we can do about it. So I'm going to get out of the way here. This is a great episode. Be sure to listen in, take notes, and touch base with Nicole Cramer. Let her know that you have heard this episode, and she offers a resource at the end. Be sure to grab that. Without further ado, here is my creative chat with Nicole Cramer. Well, Nick, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast.
I am excited to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I am excited too. And, as I was just telling you, I think this is the first time I have somebody on that we're going to actually talk about sales related things. And I know some people get that whole I don't know, sales. But I've heard you speak. We were in an event together where we met. And I know that your approach is one that includes humanity, right? And sensitivity. And I love the way that you approach it. So I'm looking forward to getting into that conversation a little bit in terms of how creatives can harness that power of actually leaning into sales and sustain a living off of what they create. But before we get there, I want to know, well, first off, what was like an early memory that you might have that's related to creativity? Like, what were the creative things that you were doing as a kid? Anything stand out?
Yeah, so many things. I never had considered myself a creative person, but I loved creating, if that makes sense. I would go to Walmart and buy all the stickers and all the markers, and I was an athlete. And so what I would do is I would make signs for everybody on my team. I was like the cheerleader, I guess, of the team. And it was so fun to just create signs. And it was from a place of like support and encouragement, but I loved doing it and I would spend hours doing it. The other thing I was really big on was scrapbooking. I loved being able to express myself through scrapbooking and be able to preserve those memories that I had had. So looking back, there were a lot of things that I did that I really enjoyed creatively. I would say more than anything, my creativity was expressed through acting and dance. Those are two areas that I really, really enjoyed and really thrived in. And that was a way for me to express myself creatively in an enjoyable way.
Love that. Yeah. You know, it's funny because so many people think when I talk about creativity, if they don't think of themselves as creative, it's usually because they say, well, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't sing, and all those things. And I'm like, that's the artistic stuff, right? I'm not talking about being artistic necessarily. I'm talking about being creative, which is so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And I believe everybody's creative. And so I love to start with that place because usually we can trace back to something from childhood to go like, oh, you know what? There's a process that started way back there that I'm actually using today. And I didn't put that together until much later, but I'm having this realization that there's something about that. Like maybe I really love constructing, or I love building, or I love, something about that process that it's part of who I am, how I'm wired. And now it gets to show up maybe in a different context, but it's still me. And so I love to kind of trace those things and find out like where did that go? What did that develop into? How did that evolve? Do
Yeah.
you see any of those correlations in what you do now and like how you show up and how you harness creativity for what you do?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think who I am as a speaker is who I was as an actor my whole life growing up. I think who I was as a teacher, because I spent 15 years as a high school math teacher, was a performer. And I believe that sales is really just the transfer of enthusiasm. And the way for us to create that enthusiasm is for us to be an edutainer. I like to call myself an edutainer. I'm an educator and an entertainer. And so much of who I am now is a product of who I've always been. And I didn't know back in the day, I think my very first acting gig was I was in like third grade and I was in a production of The Music Man with these high school kids. And I just remember falling in love with the idea of it. And if I'm being honest, who I am as a speaker is exactly that. I'm putting on a performance,
Yeah.
and it's it's my opportunity to take that hour or hour and a half that I've been given with the people that are there, and how can I maximize that experience for them so that they feel entertained and excited about being there, but also walk away with things that they can use right away. So I think for me, that is really why I love speaking so much, is it allows me to be that version.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense. And I love that term, the edgy, how do you say it again? The edutainer?
Entertainer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so true because if it's too much of one or the other, it doesn't really work well, right? Like you can entertain, but there's really no substance. And if all you do is educate, then it may be dry and boring and people don't actually receive it. So
Right.
I love that combination.
Well, I like to say the facts only tell, but the story sells. And
Mm.
if you are not showing up presenting through story, you're really losing, you're failing the mission, right? The stories are what emphasize what it is that you want people to walk away from, because what they feel in that story is they connect with it on their own level. They see themselves inside of it. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of the most valuable things we can do when we're in front of a group of people. How can I relate it to them? And the best way to do that is through story.
Yeah. Well, speaking of story, can you take us back to like, I want to know, how did you get to where you are today, kind of, but like, let's reverse engineer that a little bit. Um, so talk us through like your choices in career and how, you mentioned being the high school math teacher. And of course, there's numbers involved in that. There's numbers involved in sales, but maybe not too many other correlations. But how did you navigate that? Like, what did that look like for you as a journey?
I'll first say, I jokingly say this all the time. I talk about the topics that people don't like to talk about. Nobody ever wanted to talk about math. Nobody ever wants to talk about sales, but I'll go there, right? Because who I was as a math teacher was, well, let's make this fun. If you have to do it and you have to be here in order to graduate high school, if you have to acquire these credits and go through these courses, let's at least show up and make it fun. It doesn't have to be ugly and scary and unapproachable. And when I realized that same thing is true for me in how I teach sales, I thought, wow, let's take the salesiness out of sales and make it about human connection. Make it so that it feels good, so that when we are selling somebody something, we really feel like it's serving them. Not, I have people coming, they're like, I just don't like taking people's money. I'm like, well, then
Mhm.
stop taking their money. That's not what you're doing. There's an exchange here energetically. And they just have the easiest thing for them to exchange is money in terms of the value that you are offering them. Um, But to answer your question, it was not a straight line. Like I'm sure a lot of people listening, I don't know that many of us have straight lines from where we were and where we are now. And it's a pretty tangled, crazy line. But I went to college to play basketball. I was like I said, athlete growing up, and got a scholarship to college and just was there to play basketball, to be honest, Mike. And I did not have any declaration of like, here's what I want to, graduate with this degree in this. So by my junior year, I still hadn't, claimed a major. And I was talking to my dad and he's like, Nick, you're a junior. Like, what do you think you want to do? You might want to get more focused, and even my counselor at school was like, we need to get you in some classes so that you're actually graduating with a degree. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do anything. I just want to play basketball and have fun. That was literally, I was there to have fun. And, then I come from a family of educators and my dad said, listen, you'd be a great teacher. Just get your degree in teaching. Then you can go do whatever you want to do. And I was like, okay. And so I graduated with a degree in secondary math education, became a high school teacher. That was the next easiest thing to do. And before I knew it, 15 years had gone by and I was still doing it. And I thought, wait a minute, I was told to go get this degree and then I can do whatever I want to do with it. But I became complacent, like we stick around in something if it's easy to stick around in. And it finally got to the point where I was like, I can't be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. It had started to, like, literally, I don't mean to be dramatic, but it had started to kill me. And I think, and I'm sure you understand this and the audience understands this, when we're denying ourselves from doing the thing that we really want to do, whether it's our creative pursuits or our dreams and desires, we do start to die. And all of the circumstances in our life start to reflect that, right? So I was just not doing well health-wise, mental health, emotional health, physical health, and it was all starting to take its toll. And I thought, if I put the same effort into something else as I do into teaching, like maybe I'd enjoy it more, maybe whatever. And I had a friend around that time that was like, have you ever thought about sales? And I was like, yeah, it sounds like a game to me, but I don't want to be salesy and I don't want to, and he said, I'll put you in front of my boss for an interview. Would you go? And I said, sure. And so I went on that interview and had no sales experience. And the guy literally said, you don't have any sales experience. I can't hire you. You've never sold anything. And what I'm about to say, I want everybody to listen to carefully because everybody is in the same boat. I looked at him and I said, well, I've been selling math to teenagers for 15 years and nobody wanted to buy that. And he looked at me and he goes, that's good. That's good. And I was like, yeah, that was good. And that was my first understanding that sales has nothing to do with the transaction. Nothing. Absolutely not. Because none of those kids, and I taught at Beverly Hills High School. So those kids had credit cards that they could pay for things with, but they weren't trying to pay me for math, believe me. And so how did I get them to do something that maybe they weren't keen on or didn't necessarily want to do, but what they wanted was to graduate high school. What they wanted was their freedom. So I had to sell them what they want, give them what they need, right? Hey, let's get you out of here. Let's get you to graduate high school. In order to do that, we got to do this. Let's make it fun. If we got to show up here every single day and spend time in our life doing this, let's make it fun. And when I realized I was selling them all along, I thought, oh my God, but that's helping them. That's getting them to where they want to go ultimately. And so that was my first connection that selling is serving. So I ended up getting hired. My one goal was to be number one in the nation. I don't know where that came from. Actually, I do. I had some friends that were really successful in sales. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it. I want to be number one. I want to be the best person in the nation. And to be honest, Mike, I did not know how delusional that sounded. I did not know how, I guess I'll say ignorance is bliss. I did not know how hard it should be to accomplish that. So here I am like Pollyanna walking in on day one to my sales job that I got. And everybody's like, why would you leave teaching to come here? And I was like, because I want to be number one in the nation. I got laughed out of the room. It was a room full of sales veterans. They're like, that's cute. Good luck with that. And I was like, is it hard? I don't know. So I ended up accomplishing it, but I didn't accomplish it in the way that I think traditionally people do. And I don't mean that I was like, that different. I just focused more on the relationship and the human connection than I did on the KPIs. And what I saw in all sales worlds, now that I'm a sales coach, is that tends to be a very heavy focus, the activity. And while I will never, ever, ever say that sales is not a numbers game, because it is, and activity is required in order to create success from it, I believe that when you really focus on the person and you really make it about serving them, that the rest really does take care of itself. And so what I learned through becoming number one was like, wow, I was really just getting to know people and helping them with something that maybe they couldn't do on their own or hadn't figured out how to do on their own. And then I was like, I want to do this again. I want to be number one again. And so I did it for a second year in a row. And that's for another story at another time. But basically what happened after that second year is it didn't feel the way that I thought it was going to feel. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. Like, wait, I thought the fireworks were going to go off. I thought the
Mm-hmm.
angels were going to sing. I thought when I got this title slapped on me that I was number one, that the whole world was going to change and that I was going to feel accomplished. I was going to feel successful. And I didn't. Now, I'm proud of what I did. I was really, truly successful and it was great. And I don't, I'm very happy with what I had done. I just was confused that it didn't feel the way that I wanted to. And I got real with myself and I was like, okay, what was this really about for me? Before I got good at it, what was it about? What got me out of bed? Because when I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't number one in the nation, I was still getting out of bed. I was doing this job. And it was about two things. It was building relationships with people and helping them with their problems. And so when I really just focused on that, not only was I doing that with my customers, but then I started training people in my company who were coming to me saying, how did you become number one? Can you help me? Will you show me? And I was like, oh, this is a whole nother group of people to help. And so I just started taking them on ride-alongs. And before I knew it, I was like, they were all going on to be super successful as well and becoming in the top 10 in the company. And I thought, wow, if all these people that I'm helping are becoming in the top 10, and maybe I'm good at this, maybe this is something I could do. And that's when I learned that people get paid to help people learn how to sell. I just was doing it because I'm like, this is fun. The teacher in me reappeared. And around that time, I started my own business on the side and started coaching people. And before long, I couldn't afford to stay in my other job anymore because my business was taking off. And so I left to do that full time. And that's when some of the speaking opportunities started coming through. And so I just think, through life, it's like we can have waypoints to shoot for. And then I also think we just have to surrender and trust that the universe is always putting in front of us what's meant to be there. And as long as we keep saying yes to the things that really light us up inside, then we will keep following the right breadcrumbs that are taking us to where we want to go. So didn't get here because I knew at 15 years old, this is where I was going, but I just trusted each step of the way. And I said yes to what felt right and what lit me up. And here I am.
Yeah. What I hear in your story too is that you also have the ability to know yourself, listen to yourself, right? To be self-aware. And I think that is so key because too many times we end up getting trapped in external things, right? The voices of the people around us who are saying, it should look like this, or here's what you really need to do, or, whatever the advice, and a lot of times well-intentioned, but for us, it's not necessarily aligned with the life we're trying to create and where we're trying to go. And so I think having and honing that sense of self-awareness is huge. And obviously,
I think you just the key word, honing it.
yes.
Having it, we all have it.
Right.
Are we listening to it and are we honing it? Because I appreciate your reflection on that. But I will tell you, it has not always been my strong suit, trusting myself and listening to that inner voice. Because again, to your point, there's a right and wrong perception that people give for the world. And there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And creatives especially probably get stifled by that because it's like, well, then how would I ever create if I think that there's only one of two ways to do things, right or wrong? Then I'm not really going to let myself express myself the way that I want to. And so I think the honing of that inner voice, the honing of trusting ourselves and that self-awareness is really our job throughout our entire life. How do I get to know myself better, understand myself better, and trust myself above everything else?
Yeah. Yeah. And a sense of self-validation that I think a lot of people never really understand or embrace that. And it's a continued, I need something external to validate this for me. And when you're talking creativity too, that's especially dangerous because then you end up doing a lot of things that's people pleasing and finding solutions that maybe aren't the best solutions, but that are ones that people are expecting of you. Right.
Yep.
And so I think that sense of self-validation of going, no, like, I know this is something I'm passionate about. I know this is something I'm gifted. Let me learn to trust myself in this. I think you're spot on in that,
Yeah. Yeah. It's important.
So talking about sales, people immediately, I think, have like this reaction a lot of times when they hear even that word. It's kind of like, ooh, I'm breaking out in a rash, because I think so many people have been on the wrong end of that, so to speak, where it's been a bad experience and someone has tried to sell them on something that they didn't want, didn't need. They felt like they were just being coerced, right? And there was no trust involved. And so I love when you talk about it in terms of serving and really having a relationship with the person to because you have their best interest at heart, right? Talk a little bit about like how do you do that? And how do you enter those conversations when you encounter people who are like, sales, no, no, thank you.
Well, I have to do work daily. We all do on reframing in my own mind what sales is. And I've done this for years. I've been really successful at it. And I still have to do the work on myself daily to remind myself, yes, selling is serving. And there's billions of people who don't want or need what I have. Bottom line, there's going to be a lot of people. There's always going to be more people who probably don't need what you have than who do. And I think to answer your question, one of the first most important things we can do besides the work on ourselves and in our own mindset is to detach from any outcomes. And that's a hard one for people at first because it's like, well, yeah, but I have to sell things to make money. I have to sell things to put food on the plate, on the table. I have to sell things to pay my mortgage. I have to sell things to take care of my family. Yes, and if you are so attached to those outcomes, that's when you start to become salesy because that's when you start to make it about you. The irony is when we slow it down and we really do make it about the other person, it speeds things up and it gives everybody the outcome that they want. And so when we get so attached to an outcome, then we start to become salesy. We start to make it about us. We start to feel wonky. We don't feel good about the interaction because we know somewhere deep down, it's like, but this is just about me and wanting to make the sale. But if I understand, for example, the other day I was looking for some services with video and I have all this video, all this content. And I was like, gosh, I need to repurpose this. I need to do something with it. And I couldn't figure out, I know there's plenty of people out there in the world that do stuff with video, but my first thought was, where do I go? Who do I talk to? Who could I hire for this? And how will I find the right person? Well, if people weren't out there advertising their services to repurpose video, how would I ever find what I need? And so number one, getting visible should be our number one thing because people can't buy what they don't know is for sale. But we take ourselves out of the game because we're like, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be pushy. Well, somebody out there is freaking looking for video repurposing services. Somebody out there is looking for their illustration for their next ebook that they're putting out into the world. Somebody out there is looking for what you do. And if you are holding yourself back from doing it, I'm sorry, but you're making it about you. And you're not actually in service to the people who need it. And what you're afraid of, and the reason you're making it about you is you're like, I don't want to feel rejection. I don't want somebody to say no to me. But while you're so focused on the people who are going to say no, because they're going to say no, there are people that are going to say no. There are people who are going to not need what you have. But the more you focus on them, the more you are turning your back on the people who really do need it. And if you're not willing to wade through those waters, if you're not willing to handle that rejection and make rejection not mean anything, then ultimately you are not serving the very same people that you claim to care so much about serving. Because your creativity, here's the thing, whatever it is that you're creative in, and I appreciate you, Mike, making the distinction between artistic and creative, because I think, even in my brain, I think, well, if I can't draw, I'm not creative. Right? If I can't write a song, then I'm not creative. If I can't, but creativity has so many different forms, so many different ways to put it out into the world. And it's individual and unique for every single person. There's not one definition of creativity. But here's the thing that I think was a big switch for me. And it always brings tears to my eyes, even when I say it. My creativity is not mine. It's coming through me from the most powerful source that we are all a part of and we are all connected by. You have been given that thought, that concept, that idea, that design, that visualization. You have been given that, and it is yours to give it to the world. It is not yours to keep. And to me, that was a big aha, especially around who I am as a speaker, because I said that's one of the biggest ways that I'm creative. And I held myself back from telling my story. Like, why my story? Who am I? Why does it matter? What does it matter what I've done? Well, if I'm being honest, other people's stories are the reason I am where I am.
Yeah,
other people's experiences, life lessons, gave me hope and possibility when I saw it. And I had to do a huge reframe for myself in understanding my story isn't mine. It's meant to be shared. Now, not everybody wants to share their story. That's why not everybody is a professional speaker. I just so happen to have been blessed with certain stories and certain experiences that I am willing to share in a bigger way with the world. And they're not mine anymore. And that, when I realized it, I went, oh my God, I have an obligation to tell my story because it's not mine and it's not about me. It's about the people who will change their life when they hear it because they see possibility, they relate to it, and they see in their own world something for themselves that maybe they hadn't considered or didn't even know was possible. And if I don't share my story, that connection never happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% agree. And, for me, as I talk about it sometimes in terms of like redemption, right? Like I've gone through things that I'm like, this is a part of my story that I would really love to unsubscribe from, right? I don't really want to talk about this because this is ugly or messy or whatever. And certainly I'm not encouraging anybody to bleed on anybody, right? You got to make sure that you work through some things, you go to therapy, you get the help and the health that you need. But at some point, I think those experiences become useful when you can then redeem them. And like you said, realize this isn't just about me. This isn't just for me. This is actually for me to hold up for other people and say, look, this is what I've been through. And, if I can do X, then you can do X also, or somehow offering a sense of hope or whatever. And then, it's funny, as you're talking about that stuff and talking about sharing your story and relating to people, right? Helping them see their place in things. Why wouldn't somebody want to buy something that you had to offer, right? Because it's not like, hey, here's my widget and the 10 bullet points of why it's on sale right now and you should buy it today. This is something that changed my life and here's how. And I believe it can help change your life too. And let's talk about that. And by the way, here's something that I sell that could be of help to you. Right?
Yeah. And pardon my French, but you're fucking welcome that I put it together for you to buy.
Yeah.
Like I worked with a coach a couple of years ago and that was her big thing. You're fucking welcome that I packaged this in a way that's easy for you to buy, that's easy for you to engage with and to learn from. Because what any of us are selling, now I know creativity is unique and it's personal and we're letting it out in the world, but like what any of us are selling, people can buy other versions of it anywhere they want, or they can find it on the internet, right? But the fact that we took the time to put something together that we know is not for everybody in the world, and that's okay. We're not going to get attached to any outcome. We're not going to take it personal when it's not for them, right? The fact that we put it together like that for the people who want it and need it, yeah, you're fucking welcome that I put this together. Because I could have just kept going on and living my life and doing my thing, right? Yeah. But I took the time to put it together because there are some people out there in this world that really want it, that want to engage with it, that want to buy it, that want to appreciate it, that want to hang it on their wall, that want to learn from it, whatever it is. And to me, that's like, wow. Yeah, the fact that I put this together in a course for you to buy, or the fact that I painted all this on an illustration for you to hang in your, in your living room, like, you're welcome. And so I think also understanding that somebody isn't doing us a favor when they buy something from us. There's an equal exchange. It's an energetic exchange. Hey, I want that. I see value in that. And the easiest way for me to pay you for that is with this thing that we call currency. And I've got this amount for you that you're asking for that thing, right? It's just an exchange. Yeah. And, I had a client once, he was like, I just don't want to take people's money. I'm like, then fucking stop taking people's money. He's like, well, how am I supposed to make sales? I'm like, stop thinking about sales as taking people's money. You're not taking anybody's money. How would you feel if they were like, I'm taking his painting? They're not taking that painting from you. They're not taking the thing that you've created. It's an exchange. They see value in it. And I think at the end of the day, if we remember, not everybody sees value in everything, and that's okay. It doesn't devalue our thing. The example I use a lot, and I always laugh because no offense to people who love racing and NASCAR, but like, I couldn't give two shits about NASCAR. I don't, unless John Mayer is sitting next to me at my NASCAR seat, I'm not going to a NASCAR race. Right? Like I love John Mayer. He's there. Sign me up. Otherwise, if you're trying to sell me NASCAR tickets, I'm like, no, I'm good. And if you're trying to give me free NASCAR tickets, I'm probably still not accepting them. Not because I think that they're not valuable or that I'm, it's none of that. It's literally, I'm not interested in that. I'm not the right person for your NASCAR experience, unless John Mayer's there, and then we'll talk. But I think that is where a lot of people struggle. And I'm going to raise my hand for this too. We get so caught up in, and we try to take it personal that like, oh, they didn't want my thing. I can't even give away my stuff for free. Well, who the hell are you trying to give it away to? You might be talking to the wrong audience. You might be messaging it in the wrong way. You might be having conversations with people who really already don't see value in it. So you've got to reframe some things in your own mind, but also maybe reevaluate, who are you talking to, and is it the right person? Because that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so often too, there's a sense of carrying our own stories about money into things. And it's,
Mhm.
I've experienced this and I've seen it in other people as well, where it's you you predetermine what somebody is willing to buy something at. So you undervalue and you
Yeah.
go, well, that no one would ever pay X amount of dollars for this. So I'm
Mhm.
automatically going to discount it even before anybody would even ask for it, just because I think that no one would really be able to afford what I really want to charge for this thing.
Yeah.
And so making those decisions because maybe you wouldn't purchase something at that price, but that doesn't mean somebody else wouldn't, right?
Right.
All the
Well,
stories
you
we tell
can
ourselves.
purchase it at that price because you're the creator of it. It comes easy for you. So for you,
Yes.
it's like, yeah, but this is easy. Why would somebody pay? Because that person does not have the same talent and skill as you do, but they need the product of your talent and skill. And so they're willing to exchange that money for it. You might look at it and think, that thing, that was
Mm-hmm.
easy. It's like,
Right.
I say this to my accountant a lot. I have a great accountant and he's awesome. I'm like, I am so glad you know the laws and the things because you couldn't pay me enough to try to do my own taxes. I don't want to learn all of that stuff. Thank God there's people in this world who
Yeah.
care enough about that to learn it and then package it in a way that, hey, do my taxes for me. Here's some
Mm-hmm.
money. It's so, so valuable for me to pay him to do that. And he's just one of many, right? Like oil changes. I'm not trying to do my own oil change. Thank God there's
Mm-hmm.
companies that do that. And so that I can just take my car in because for me, it might take me 3 hours and a lot of YouTube videos. It takes me 45 minutes and 70
Mm-hmm.
bucks and I've got my oil change, right? So I think a lot of times we devalue it because it does come easy for us, but we have to remember there's a lot of people out there that it doesn't come easy for that need it. There's
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of other people who don't need it and don't want it. And we just cannot take that personal or make it a thing because it's not just because somebody else, again, NASCAR, listen, that's a multi-billion dollar industry.
Yeah.
Just because I'm over here saying I don't want it doesn't take anything away from the success of it because they have their demographic, they have their people, they know who they're talking to. And it's just not, I don't see NASCAR ads on anything that I do. I probably will now that I said it out loud, but
Right.
right. But I'm not the person. And so I think that's a big thing for people is, are you talking to the right people? And, another example that I give that I think really resonates with people, Mercedes is not sitting around on Saturday mornings going, shit, somebody else bought a Honda. What are we going to do? And there's nothing wrong with Hondas or Mercedes or whoever wants either one. We all get to choose. But the people that are looking at Hondas are not the ideal client for the Mercedes people. It's a functionality wise, same thing, right? Get you from point A to point B.
Right.
But there's people that want a different experience when they're in their car. And Mercedes might have that for those people. But Mercedes isn't sitting around worrying about the fact that people are still walking into Kia and Honda and some of these different levels of car purchases. They're like, we know our people and we're
Mm-hmm.
marketing to them. So somebody who's willing to pay $75,000 for a car is not the same type of person as somebody who's looking for a $12,000, $15,000 car. Nobody's wrong in any of this. We've just got to know who we're talking to. And if you continue to try to sell those Mercedes to the people who have a budget for a Honda, you're going to be really disappointed and you're going to think something's wrong with your product and your business. There's nothing wrong with it. You're most likely talking to the wrong people. And then you're making it mean something about you and the value of what you offer to the world. And that's just a story that's holding you back from doing more of it and blessing the world with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so prevalent, the starving artist mentality is a thing and everybody knows it's a thing is because it's so prevalent. And
It's
I think,
virtuous for people. It's
right.
right. Like, I
Yeah.
just love this so much. I would do it for free. I mean, it becomes like this virtuous thing for people. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is very prevalent.
Yeah. And really, we need less martyrs on that front.
Please.
Because if more creative people knew and understood their worth and understood the worth of what it is that they create and understood the value that they bring to people, I think we would start to see the tide change in that regard. And even the market reflecting that of people being willing to pay for certain things and not expecting certain things for free, because I think creative people perpetuate that and that's what people become accustomed to. So of course they're going to expect some things for free or not value it at what it should be because the
Right.
creator doesn't even value it at what it should be. Right.
Yep. Well, I think if we were to go in the opposite direction, right? I talk Mercedes and Honda, and if you're Mercedes, you're marketing to a different level of people. Well, what if you're Honda, and or let's just take ourselves out of the car world. What if you're like, hey, I've got this these drawings that I do, And, I just don't know if people would ever pay for this. So I'm only going to charge like $50 a drawing and I'm going to put them out there. Well, somebody like Oprah Winfrey is not looking for a $50 per drawing artist, right? So a lot of times what people also do is they try to give stuff away for so cheap or for free. And they're like, nobody wants it. Nobody has any money to pay me. They might have so much money that they're trying to pay you that they're looking at your thing going, I don't want something at that level. I'm looking for something that's even bigger than that. There's a quick story I'll share. A friend of mine, she was in a coaching group that I was in, a mastermind a few years ago. And way before that, when she had first started working for this coach, she's an esthetician and she was doing $45 an hour facials. And she was like, I want to do more. I want to make more, whatever. And so the coach said, okay, I want you to design your dream package. And she said, okay. And she said, and just email me what your dream package is. Let's get an idea of what your dreams are, what your visions are. So she designs this package. She prices it at $5,000. She emails the coach and the coach emails right back and said, great, put it on your website. And she was like, no, you just told me to design my dream package. I'm not putting that on my website. I'm not ready to do that. She said, put it on your website. And so my friend did, she put it on her website and obviously was like terrified of doing it, right? Because she went from $45 an hour to now, I've got this $5,000 package. Within days, the Wayne Brady show reached out to her and said, we'd like to buy 10 of your $5,000 package. And she said, I'm curious, what was it about? There's a lot of different options out there. What was it about me and what I offer that made you feel like, this is the right fit and you want 10 of them? And they said, because yours was the most expensive package. And that's what we were looking for to give as gifts on our show. We wanted to make sure it was the most expensive. So here we are playing this game of like, nobody will pay more than $45 an hour, or nobody will pay more than this, or nobody will pay more than that. And I had the same experience when I first moved to Beverly Hills and I was a high school teacher. Somebody said, hey, do you want to get into tutoring? And I was like, yeah, I want to tutor. I was tutoring, before where I lived in Ohio. And they said, what do you charge? I've got some people who are interested. What do you charge? And I said, I don't know, like $15 an hour. And the person laughed and they said, nobody will pay that. And I was like, is it too much? And he goes, no, nobody's going to think you're any good at $15 an hour because the tutors around here charge $100 an hour. I said, $100 an hour is what people are charging for math tutoring? Because again, it came easy for me. It was like, whatever. And where I lived before in small town, Ohio, nobody was paying $100 an hour. And I said, well, you mean they would really pay 100? He said, I guarantee you're not going to get hired at $15 an hour. I said, okay, I'll do 50. I had probably 6 or 7 different conversations when I was a $50 tutor. None of them hired me. None of these parents hired me. They went on and they hired somebody else who was charging more than me. So finally I moved, I did get one person hired me and her son didn't show up and she never paid me. So that was my lesson at a $50 an hour tutor. And then I went up to 85 because I just couldn't do that 100 for some reason. And I ended up getting hired at 85. The woman paid me way more than 85. They were a wonderful, wonderful family. She used to be a teacher. So she saw this, she just had this soft spot in her heart for teachers. She also happened to be Maria Schwarzenegger's best friend, or Maria Shriver's best friend. And before I knew it, I was sitting in the Schwarzenegger's house tutoring them. And it was just one of those things where I was like,
hold on a minute. I know there's a joke in there too. It's not a tutor.
It's not a tutor. I just had to. Totally. I love it. I think that's the first time I've ever told that story where somebody actually called that out, but that's exactly it. It's not a tutor. And by the way, I tutored right across the hall from Arnold's gym, in his private gym in his own house. And I was sitting there thinking, how does this happen? This is so incredible. But I never would have gotten hired at the level, but I would have told myself stories. I would have had my friend not said, hey, everybody charges at least $200. So what was really interesting is here I am charging $85 an hour. And I would go to this, not the Schwarzeneggers, but this was the other family. I would go to their house and I would tutor the son and the daughter. And then they would have me stay for family dinner because their housekeeper always made a big family dinner. And, it was like one of those situations. And then I would go to leave and she would be ready to write me a check. And she was like, how long were you here? And I was like, well, I tutored, both the kids and that was 2 hours. And she's like, no, how long were you here? And I was like, well, I got here at 4. She'd write for whatever amount of time I was there, plus my driving time. She'd write me this big check and again, I was a teacher at the time. I had this like no wealth consciousness, no money mentality. And I was like so nervous to even accept it. And then everybody, so once you get in Beverly Hills, especially once you kind of get into that world, you become known as a good tutor and other people want to hire you. Everybody I work for, that's what they would do. And I went to the one woman who I was working for and I said, hey, the drive was long. There were a lot of things going on that were just making it harder for me to get there and tutor her kids and get back home. And I said, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm probably only going to be able to do this for a few more weeks. It's just become, a little bit tougher with traffic and everything to manage. And she goes, what do you need? And I looked at her and I was like, I'm sorry, what do you mean? And she goes, what do you need? Like, what do I need to pay you to make it worth your time? And I was like, and she's like, 200 an hour, 250 an hour. Like, what do you, and I was like, that sounds good.
Helicopter service.
Next thing I know, I'm like, the very thing that I thought I couldn't do anymore, clearly I have a price, and at $250 an hour, I'll figure out the traffic to get here. Yes. And I'll make it work. But I think so often I would have never, ever imagined that somebody would look at me and say, hey, this is valuable enough for us. What do you need in order to make it work? Because I need you to keep coming here. Yeah. And I think so often that's what we're all doing. We're devaluing. We're not understanding how valuable it is to someone else because it comes easy for us, or we have some wealth consciousness issues, or we've never really developed our relationship around money, and we have weird things about receiving, which is a big one for all of us. That's one of the reasons why we become our own sales prevention officers in our business. We have weirdness around receiving. And all of those stories were big ahas for me, and part of the work that I've done to understand that our job is to put it out there, to offer to the world what we do. Because again, it wasn't ours ever to begin with. It was given to us from the universe, from the creator, from whatever you want to call it, God, Buddha, I don't care what you call it, but it was given to you and it's yours to give out, and it's yours to understand, to not take it personal when somebody doesn't want it, because it's not personal, but to stop worrying so much about those people that don't want it and stay focused on the people who do need you, because there are enough of them that you can make a viable business for the rest of your life and do great work for the people who need it, as long as you're willing to not focus on the outcomes. And remember that rejection is going to be a part of it, and it doesn't need to be anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Nick, man, I'll tell you, first off, I appreciate your passion and your drive in doing this. And I can tell that this means a lot to you. This is everything, right? And that comes across in how you communicate about it. And I think it's important because it's helping people understand mindsets that they need to change and methodologies that they need to change, all those things, and in a way that's accessible. So I appreciate you unpacking some of those things, even in the examples you're giving. And I know that you have a resource that you can give to people that can help them if they're thinking like, I'm not even sure what to say, right? I don't know how to engage in these conversations. Can you talk briefly a little bit about that, and like, where can people find that?
Yes, I think that's one of the biggest things that holds people back from making sales, besides their own mindset, which we've done a good chunk of conversation around today. Once we get past that mindset, what I find that stands in the way of people making sales is they don't know what to say, when to say it, or how to make it count. Mm-hmm. And so fine, now I know I want to sell something. Now I know what I do is valuable. How the heck do I get in conversations? How do I actually put that out there in the world so that I know, I'm in conversations where people want to buy it? And so along with being a sales coach and a keynote speaker, I'm also an Exactly What to Say certified guide. So it is absolutely, I appreciate you recognizing the passion in me, because it is absolutely a part of me to help people know how to have more competence and confidence in their conversations, so that they're getting more of the outcomes that they want. And one of the most powerful things we can do, and I want everybody to listen to this carefully, we can learn to be more curious and ask more questions. You actually want to do the opposite of what it feels like you should do, right? Sales for decades and decades, for hundreds of years, really, have been taught in a different way than I believe that we are moving into now. There's a big paradigm shift. People really are looking for more connection, not just on the personal level, but literally in business. And I think sales has shifted a lot, and it really is about the relationship. And what we're really doing, my tagline, selling is serving, we're really serving people. But what we want to do is come from a place of curiosity, not from a place of certainty and need and pushing people. That's the way that sales have been in the past, right? ABC, always be closing. What we want to do is really establish connection, relatability, show empathy. And in order to do that, we've got to stay curious and ask good questions. So the gift that I would love to share with anyone who's listening who wants to ask better questions and get more of the outcomes they're looking for is I put together a list of 23 questions that will be very beneficial in your sales conversations to making more sales. These are really powerful questions. What they do is they help you stay curious. They give you context. When we ask questions and we slow things down, we hear exactly what we need to hear to help that person make a decision. Because all you're doing as a salesperson, you're just a professional mind maker upper. That's all. You're a professional mind maker upper. And the ability that you have to influence conversations depends on your ability to connect, stay curious, and ask good questions. So I will share the link with you, Mike, and you can share it with whoever's interested. Please download it if you're looking for some better questions. There are 23 of them that are really powerful, and I hope you use them to put more of your good work out in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll put that link in the show notes so people can just click and get that easily. And, I want to throw down the challenge too for people listening right now who are going, okay, this sounds interesting. This sounds like maybe I'll download this thing. That's the first step, right? I want to challenge people to think creatively about how they can engage with sales. And that sometimes means, like you said, asking questions, taking a different position, following some questions into a new category or into a new terrain that you haven't been in before. And sometimes that can feel awkward and scary or whatever, but that's when we have breakthroughs on things. That's when we start to see momentum in certain directions. And so I want to challenge people to use their creativity in terms of sales, in terms of engaging with this part, and making sure that they're not only creating the things that they're passionate to create, but then also getting it into the hands of the people who can be blessed by it, like you said. So I appreciate that completely. Aside from the download, is there any place that someone can go and follow along with you, hear more about just the things that you have to offer, and just when you're putting videos up and talking more about sales, where can people go to kind of connect with you?
Yeah, I have a lot of fun and get creative on Instagram. And if anybody is looking to have a further conversation or just connect there, would love to hear from you in the DMs. If there's a takeaway that you would want to share, I would love to hear, from anything that stood out today. So yeah, catch me on Instagram at the Nicole Cramer. And there's some fun reels that I do on there that'll help you with sales, and would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we could talk for days about this stuff. Unfortunately, we're at the top of our time, but maybe we'll do a round two at some time and dive a little bit even deeper into some of the sales process and stuff. But for now, at least people can download that giveaway that you have, and then also follow you on Instagram. And thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate it too. And I hope this gets people out in the world doing more of the beautiful work that they do and understanding how valuable it really is.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.